As I said, making sure that there is a support for innovative new companies in this province so that they have the ability to expand the economic base of the province, to keep young people here. We have entered into many different workforce development programs designed to reskill people to make sure that they're able to meet the needs in the current labour force. Mr. Speaker, as I pointed out, we're making investments like we are in LED roadway lighting, which is a progressive company that's continuing to expand. But there are many other companies in this province that we are working with in order to make sure that there is a strong economic base for the province.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the member from Dartmouth East pointed out, residential electrical bills will increase by almost 9% on January 1st. Again, this is a 22% increase in power bills since 2007. There are many Nova Scotians who must make the choice between food and electricity. This is not right and it's not fair for Nova Scotia's families. My question to the Minister of Community Services: what can you do to help low-income Nova Scotians, especially this winter?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the question from the honourable member. We have done a lot, because one of the things that we have been doing that the former government didn't even know how to do was to strategize and plan. And that's why within our first year we invested into the income assistance program because of the affordable tax credits that we created and the poverty reduction tax credit we created. For the first time in years, this province saw an increase of $26 a month for those who are on income assistance rather than the $4 to $6 previous years. We're working to make those situations better and making changes to the income assistance program through a variety of means. And as I said, it's because we do have a strategy that we are rolling out. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reality is that a family of 3 living on income assistance receives a shelter allowance of $620. This is barely enough to cover rent, and many rentals don't even include heating or electricity costs. My question to the Minister of Community Services: are you going to again raise income assistance rates to at least compensate for the increasing NDP electricity tax?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we did is we took the HST and our portion off of the heating and electricity, which is a step that wasn't done before. The member will learn over time. The fact is, as I mentioned before, we do have a plan. I know that it is a struggle for individuals on income assistance. It's too bad that there wasn't more investment in that area in previous times. It wasn't looked at for years and years, except for the $4 or $6 increase. But this is a government that truly cares and is making changes within the policies for income assistance and within the variety of things such as the COHAB. We made an announcement with regards to that has changed now, that people can also save more money on income assistance without losing that. So there's a lot of things that if the member wants to sit down with me, I can go over all those things that we have been doing. Thank you.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Regardless of how we explain it, the power bills have increased 22%, and any savings that the NDP had promised for the HST rebate are certainly long gone. Mr. Speaker, the NDP government cut HARP, and they've increased electricity bills. The NDP is making it harder to afford necessities. So my question to the minister: is this what the government meant by a better deal for today's families?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you for the question. I want to clarify that we didn't cut the HARP program. One of the things that we do is we work in coordination. We may make some changes to a variety of programs. However, this government works within all of its interdepartmental aspects. We work with the other departments, just not in our silos. But as I mentioned to the honourable member, we have done more with income assistance in this last year and a half than you can even state years and years before that. And I'm very proud of all those things that this government has dedicated themselves to help Nova Scotians, and especially those who are impoverished. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister of Education. I want to start by being very clear that the Progressive Conservative Caucus supports the efforts of the MLA from Cape Breton South to keep Holy Angels High School where it is in South Bend, Sydney. Early today, the minister, in a desperate attempt to deflect attention away from the NDP's abysmal failure to support excellent young women and the Sydney community, issued a release headed, quote, Minister of Education committed to keeping Holy Angels School open, end quote. How is it the minister can say she's committed to keeping Holy Angels open when in the next breath she says moving the school and students to another location is an option? Mr. Speaker, why isn't the interest of these young women here today an option for that minister and her government?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's interesting.
Order, please. The Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's interesting in the discussion, the hour-long discussion with students and parents from Holy Angels this afternoon. I finished off by suggesting that reasonable people could sit down together or offer options to the school board that could be discussed in a common sense, practical way that would move this issue forward. And it doesn't make, I don't think it furthers the best interests of education in that region of the province to take an emotional venting in this chamber. Mr. Speaker, my government is committed to keeping that school open. I have said that time and time again. The solution won't be found on the floor of this chamber. It's going to be found by supporting the school board in its search for options that will satisfy all the needs of the various interest groups. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North in your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the students here don't buy the minister's answer. We don't buy her answer. The community doesn't buy her answer. What they want is the minister to buy their school for them. That's what they expect. That's what they want. The minister suggested every possible outcome but the right one, and that is her leadership. It's bad enough she's thrown Holy Angels and the community into chaos, creating another crisis rather than a solution. Will the minister finally do the right thing, show leadership, support the board, these outstanding young women, and buy the school? Yes or no, Minister?
The Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would suggest it's not my leadership that is at question here. The government and the Department of Education, we do not have the money in the department's budget to buy that building, but we are willing to work with stakeholders and support the board in its...
Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Education has the floor.
The department is willing to work with the school board and support it in its search to find a compromise, a solution that will work in the best interests of the young students, both current and future, of Holy Angels. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, according to the minister, it seems everyone is at fault except this failed NDP socialist experiment. I'm glad the students rented their own bus to avoid the wrath of the Dexter bus, but unfortunately it's rolling through Sydney as we speak here in the legislature. Mr. Speaker, we all know if Holy Angels were in Dartmouth, South Portland Valley, this wouldn't even be an issue. And a student poster outside earlier says it all. It's a sad day when you see angels crying. And that's exactly what she's doing to those young women in Cape Breton. Will the minister finally admit this is just another example of the Dexter NDP destroying the fabric of communities and now the young women of Holy Angels and Sydney?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've mentioned several times I'm going to Sydney to meet with other students and faculty and parents. I'm also going to be meeting with the school board. I want to get a status report on just what the school board's been doing to resolve this issue. I'll be very interested to hear their various options. There is no gold at the end of the rainbow, and the Department of Education does not have the money to purchase the building. But we will certainly be working to support the school board and other community interests as they work together to try to find a solution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Over the past couple of months, women in the Annapolis Valley and southwest Nova Scotia have been wondering whether there is any truth to the rumour that the mobile breast screening unit will no longer be providing service to their communities in the near future. Mr. Speaker, as you are more than aware, by their very nature, mobile breast screening units are able to provide service in remote communities, enabling more women to access this very important diagnostic test. They have proven their worth by saving lives and reducing healthcare costs as a result of ensuring early detection of breast cancer. My question to the Minister, Mr. Speaker, is will she indicate with a yes or no whether the Western Mobile Breast Screening Unit will be taken off the road come next fiscal year?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, breast screening is a very important program in this province. We have a very strong program. We have 11 fixed sites. We have 3 mobile units. 2 of the mobile units are not digital mammography. They are the old machines. We're currently reviewing that program, Mr. Speaker, and when the review is complete, we will have a better appreciation of what's needed, where it's needed, and how to continue this excellent service, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as the Minister said, there are only 3 mobile units in the province, and certainly the one that we're talking about here in the Western region is definitely the oldest on the road. It looks to be about 13 years old. The service on the Eastern mobile unit, which serves Cape Breton, was actually converted to full digital mammography after it had reached the age of 13. So my question to the Minister is, given that they are now of the same age, will the Minister confirm whether or not she will be looking at transferring the equipment and making this field mobile digital mammography digital rather than the older system? So I want you to change it.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to tell members of this House that in the past year, this government invested $7 million in upgrading digital mammography in the province of Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, we will continue to support this very valuable program for women and to ensure that we have better health care for the people of Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the minister pointing out how much has been invested in that. I realize it provides more accurate results and faster results, and more women are able to be seen when we're using digital mammography. So we're glad about that. I think it should be mentioned as well, Mr. Speaker, that a lot of the money is raised by local groups like Bust a Move last year that raised $1 million itself to buy one of those machines. But Mr. Speaker, in the 2009 annual report of the Nova Scotia Breast Screening Program, they indicate a number of the challenges that exist, and among them is the inequitable distribution of mobile screening vans. And I would like to ask the minister today if the minister could indicate how she plans to address the issue of the inequitable distribution of mobile screening vans, which was recognized in their annual report almost 2 years ago.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, we have 11 fixed sites in the province of Nova Scotia. This is a very equitable distribution of digital mammography in the province. They're all modern, up-to-date equipment. And additionally, we have 2 of the mobile units are the old analog units. We are reviewing the needs in the province right now, and when we have a decision, we will certainly be making those decisions known, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, as the Minister has admitted, student absenteeism is at an all-time high in our province. However, Holy Angels High School continues to buck the trend, reporting an attendance rate of more than 90%. Furthermore, the mature, 90% plus, Mr. Speaker. Furthermore, the mature young women at Holy Angels rank high near the very top when it comes to math and English scores. As the Minister of Education can see, we're dealing with a group of bright young women who get it, who see it, and who simply want their institution of academic excellence to stay put. Why, Minister, are you against proven academic excellence models in our province, Holy Angels being a bright light of them?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
My department and government recognize the valuable contribution that Holy Angels makes to the young women of Cape Breton, and has a rich history, and it provides a very excellent, it does a wonderful job of educating young women, and we certainly congratulate them and their family and the staff there. They do a great job, and that's why we're working so hard to help it continue. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of our future leaders are here from Holy Angels High School, and they're sitting in the gallery today, and their spirits are high, even if the government's attitude towards them is very low. Last week, I received an email from one of them. Cynthia Burke, a young Holy Angels student, captured the spirit of her school in 2 short sentences. She wrote, "Holy Angels isn't just a school, it's a place where we are finding the people that we want to be in life. We are getting the skills we need to be successful and powerful women." Mr. Speaker, my question is now to the Premier. After hearing Cynthia's words, can you explain why this institution of academic excellence is being dismantled and disregarded by your NDP government?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can tell the member opposite that the fact the opposite is actually true. What we're attempting to do is work with the school board to find options for them in order to be able to keep that institution open and continue to provide the service that that school has provided. The excellent staff has given the support to the students to allow them to achieve the levels that they have achieved. We hope that that will continue, and we hope that the school board will do everything in its power to ensure that it does.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the school board is doing everything in its power. It's wanting the Premier and his government to do everything that's within their power, and that's the right thing. And he can make that decision here today for these young women and their academic institution. I'd like to share another comment from Kayla McKinnon, a grade 10 Holy Angel student. She wrote last week in a letter to the editor, quote, "The school is a place where everyone feels comfortable. They never worry about who they are, but who they want to be. I've only attended the school for about 2 months, but already I cannot picture my life without it." To this point, Mr. Speaker, that the Premier and his government are missing. Holy Angels is making a real difference in the lives of these young women. Think about Cynthia and Kayla. Show leadership and instruct your Minister of Finance and Minister of Education to negotiate the $750,000 that you know you can do, Premier, required to purchase Holy Angels, and commit to keeping it open. Will the Premier, Mr. Speaker, do it? Yes or no for these young women here today?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'll just reiterate, as the Minister of Education said earlier in reply to one of the earlier questions, she will be attending in Cape Breton with the school board for the purposes of discussing the options for Holy Angel School. And, Mr. Speaker, the reality is our government would like to see...
Order. The Honourable Premier has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, our government would like to see Holy Angel School remain open, operating, and providing the fine service that they have provided over the years.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, last Friday, the Minister of Education announced 6 consultations for student financial assistance. Now, I believe it's very important to hear from students. But the government knows a review has been done in the recent past, and the fixes we need are already clear. According to the Chronicle Herald, students said the province did a consultation just 3 years ago, and the government is stalling the process for reform. This is an unnecessary exercise when the minister has threatened outrageous cuts in other areas. We don't have the money, for example, to buy Holy Angels. My question to the Minister of Education, how much will this consultation cost?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll have to check on that, but I believe we're doing it pretty much in-house. And we're concentrating the meetings and the online input within a few weeks so that we can get the information very quickly. It's one of these cases, it's a catch-22. I mean, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. The environment around post-secondary education has changed significantly over the past year or two.
Order,
and I think
order, please. There's too much chatter across the floor of the chamber. The Honourable Minister of Education has the floor.
The environment around post-secondary education has changed significantly in the last couple of years, and we just want to make sure that all the stakeholder groups have an opportunity to give us their latest thoughts and suggestions and analysis. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the 2007 consultation document noted that this review was met with enthusiasm and was championed by the management of the Nova Scotia Student Assistance Program. The 2007 review outlined what students have been asking for: front-end grants, simpler applications, and an examination of allowable costs. Now, Friday, Gabe Hoogers from the Canadian Federation of Students said, "We need meaningful action. We need grants. We need to ensure that accessibility to post-secondary education is ensured in Nova Scotia." And that sounds to me like the same thing they were asking for 3 years ago. It's hard to understand why we need to do another full consultation. So my question to the Minister of Education is, are you hoping for a different outcome this time?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We should have that information back from this very sort of a condensed, quick version of a consultation within 3 to 4 weeks. And it would enable us to move forward with our further discussions and decision-making around these issues. And I think it's a sign of a responsible government to take the opportunity at all times to consult with its citizens, especially when you do it in such a timely and speedy manner. Thank you.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this government has a habit of using reports and highly controlled public consultations as cover when it wants to make unpopular decisions. We saw this with the back to balance sessions from the Minister of Finance. Now it appears the Minister of Education is going down the same path. The O'Neill report and these consultations are providing cover for raising tuition. My question to the Minister, are you planning to remove the tuition cap in the coming year?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
This government relies upon the best information possible, research and analysis, and those decisions have not been made, but we will take the time because we care and we listen, and then we'll act. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Premier. In a recent interview with the Amherst Daily News, his Minister of Finance discussed a recent survey of consumers in Cumberland County. Amazingly, the Minister was impressed with the results of his survey and downplayed the damage done to retailers in the border region. Of course he did. He commented that most Amherst retailers can draw some comfort from the information that he has received. My question to the Premier, how do you define comfort to those Cumberland retailers who have seen businesses around them close and find it harder and harder every day to make a living because of your unfair, non-competitive tax policies?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member opposite for the question. I believe that the surveys referring to was part of an engagement process that the Minister of Finance had with the local business owners in order to set a baseline and to be able to provide reliable statistics about what was actually going on in the border area. And Mr. Speaker, I think it intends to reflect that many of the fears with respect to these types of increases in cross-border traffic did not in fact bear out. This is of course a pattern that's been going on for many years. And of course, it's not a comfort to see business going across the border. But I'm told by the Premier of New Brunswick, he faces the same thing on the Quebec border, and it is a feature of being a border town.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Finance also commented on that report, indicating that the data shows that there appears to have been a slight shift in shopping behaviour, but the changes are not large. In actual fact, Mr. Speaker, the report clearly shows that although 70% of respondents have not changed their shopping habits as a result of the HST increase, 30% have, Mr. Speaker. So my first supplementary question to the Premier, can you explain how a 30% change in consumer habits due to your increase in the HST is comforting to Cumberland County businesses and the people that shop there?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that the member opposite has a comfortable time with interpretation of data, but I will allow the Minister of Finance to go into some more of the features of the study for him.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to say that the debate can proceed on the basis of facts, that the data that we have collected is now available to all Nova Scotians, anyone in Cumberland County or anywhere else, or the Leader of the Opposition and the Department of Finance website, so that Nova Scotians can see exactly the same data that we have. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, that if the Leader of the third party wouldn't cherry-pick the data and look at the total data and what it shows us, it shows that the changes in behavior have been very slight, particularly concentrated in the retail gasoline sector, Mr. Speaker, which we know is a concern, but we have been working very closely along with a member for Cumberland North and the whole government to focus on what is the real issue in Cumberland County, Mr. Speaker, and that is jobs and economic development for everyone.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The only thing slight here today is the sleight of hand that's going on over there across the aisle with that government as they try and explain this survey to the people of Cumberland County. In response to concerns expressed by business in Cumberland County, the minister has said that he thinks everyone agrees that the real issue here is not the HST. Well, Mr. Speaker, that statement is in stark contrast to the quarterly business barometer released by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business in Nova Scotia that stated that 65% of their business respondents rated tax and regulatory costs as their top concern. So my final question to the Premier is this: when will your government stop comforting the retailers of Cumberland County and start listening to their concerns?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I know that the member opposite had the opportunity to look at the survey of the membership by the CFIB, and he would know that, among other things, they found that confidence among business owners is continuing to climb, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question today is for the Minister of Community Services. Section 5-17-6 of the Employment Supports Income Assistance Policy Guide refers to a policy centered around quitting or being fired from your place of employment. The policy, Mr. Speaker, states that the individual is suspended from qualifying for any benefits for a period of 6 weeks from the time the application is received. So my first question to the Minister is whether or not she believes this is a blanket policy that applies to all, or, as she has stated many times in this House before, should be determined on a case-to-case basis.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Honourable Member for the question. One of the facts that you have to look at with policies is that you do need to have a policy in place. However, the challenge is to have that flexibility within the policy, and that's why we allow our caseworkers, who are very well trained, to look at the policy, however, have that flexibility in order to make sure that there's some individualization to their decision making. And if they have any issues with that, we have a process in place that the individual who's receiving that advice from the caseworker can take it further if they're in disagreement with it. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this past week I had a 62-year-old senior in my community approach my office who just lost her job, and I encouraged her to apply for assistance. At that point, she expressed to me that in her whole life she's never had to do this, to go to the department or the government for assistance, and that she only needed short-term help to get past this little hump while she applied for other jobs. Mr. Speaker, she no sooner returned in a couple days and informed me that she was denied. That, Mr. Speaker, set her world in a whole other turmoil. She could no longer afford the rent. She's awaiting an eviction notice. She had no money for food, and more importantly, Mr. Speaker, this senior is a diabetic and can now not afford her medication. So my question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister is this situation and others like it going to be how this Minister and the government cut 5% from this department on the backs of low-income Nova Scotians and seniors?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Honourable Member knows, and that I've been able to show, and this government has been able to show, that we truly care about Nova Scotians. And that's why we have a plan that we're moving forward to make changes to ESIA redesign. I have said 100 times to the Honourable Member and to also other members in this House that any type of policy that they're aware of or they feel has some struggle surrounding it, I'm more than willing to sit down and look at that policy and to see whether that policy is a workable policy or may need some changes. Thank you.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, you know, I appreciate the minister's comments, and so do many other Nova Scotians who've waited for many years for a review of the ESIA Act. The fact, though, Mr. Speaker, is that this constituent and many others around this province are in need now, not in 4 or 5 years, Madam Minister. So my final question, Mr. Speaker, is simply this. When will her department and this government ensure that individuals get the help they need instead of putting them on the streets and being near homeless?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As I said before, I mean, we're looking at policies that have been in existence for 20, 30 years that no one even took the opportunity to look at. We're looking at those policies. We've made changes. There has been recent announcements in terms of policies that we have there has been policies that we have recently changed, and there's hundreds of policies. So we're willing to look at them. I do know that there's people that are in dire needs now, and that's one thing that I have to struggle with each and every day. I wish it wasn't like that. I wish that there was much more attention over past years to these individuals in our province. However, there wasn't. But now you have a government that's going in there and they're fixing that and making those positive changes. Thank you.
The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, residents of Ingramport are worried that their homes are in jeopardy because the proposed St. Margaret's Bay Connector Road, even though there are 4 other routes for the connector that would not require destroying homes. Mr. Speaker, if the government is going to build the connector, it's just common sense that it would build it on one of the 4 routes that would not harm homes and uproot families. So my questions to the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal. Will the Minister promise not to pave over homes if the government decides to go ahead and build that connector road?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the question. You know, the concern in the community, of course, whether there should actually be a connector road with 5 routes. Community meeting held by the MLA from Chester St. Margaret's, well attended, lots of input, lots of people discussing it. Today, the head of St. Margaret's Bridge is out. The concern, of course, is now that children are being inconvenienced as they come back from St. Margaret's Bay Elementary with an extra 30-minute drive, because without the connector, not existent today, they have to go all the way to Hubbard's, back up into the 103, back past where I live to the neighborhood of Tantallon Woods. Is there a need for a connector? You know, people stop me in the arena, they stop me when I'm grocery shopping and say a connector road is necessary. A process is underway, a process involving a group of people who are listening and asking questions on the need for this connector road. That process is fair, it's open, it's transparent, and come February when we have the open house, after that open house, a decision will be made.
The honourable member for Clare on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, an internal email from the department suggests that transportation officials have already settled on the route that could destroy homes. And the email states, and I quote, "Due to operational requirements, we cannot relocate the proposed interchange. The proposed location near Ingramport has its challenges, but it is still the best location," end of quote. Mr. Speaker, I'll table a copy of that email. Mr. Speaker, it sounds like families in Ingramport have good reason to be concerned that the connector is indeed going to be built over their homes. I don't think this is what Nova Scotians had in mind when the NDP promised a better deal for families. So again, to the Minister of Transportation, will the Minister give Ingramport families a better deal and promise not to pave over their homes unnecessarily?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. The engineers in the Department of Transportation Infrastructure Renewal advise the minister. The minister will make the final decision. I have told the people of this community many, many times, the decision has not yet been made.
The honourable member for Clare on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad to hear the minister indicating to the House that the minister will have the final say. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Transportation is planning to move forward with its plan to build a connector road that would destroy homes and properties in Ingramport. The minister says the decision hasn't been made, but his officials have already decided that the Ingramport location is, and I quote, the best, end of quote. So again, my final question to the minister is, will the minister promise Ingramport residents that their homes will not be bulldozed unnecessarily?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure, Renewal.
The commitment and the promise that I make to the people of Chester St. Margaret's, the people who live in Timberlea Prospect and Nova Scotians, is this minister is going to continue to listen. He's going to continue to consult, going to continue to have faith in the process when we were looking at the need for a connector road. A need for a connector road with 5 proposed routes, environmental assessments underway, various other concerns being addressed. That's the commitment that I will give the people of that community. No decision made. We're looking forward to the open house. After the open houses and the input from the community who are present that evening, that's when a decision will be made. People will be listened to. That's an assurance that I'm sure the people of that community know.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, time and time again, I have asked this government about making the Chignecto Game Sanctuary a fully protected wilderness area. So once more, my question to the Minister of Natural Resources, when will the Chignecto Game Sanctuary be granted full protection status?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member for the question. I can't tell him that. This really is in the purview of the Department of Environment. The process generally for designation is a couple of years, but I can get back to the member to give him a more timely timeline, and as quick as I can do that.
The honourable member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are hearing rumors that even if this area is granted full protection, invasive activities such as logging will continue because of the NDP government's deal with Northern Pulp. My question to the minister, will you allow logging or other invasive activities to continue if the Chignecto Game Sanctuary is granted full protection status in the future?
The honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are a number of activities that can happen in wilderness areas. Actually, hunting is one, and I'm kind of thinking maybe, in fact, that this was a sanctuary might rule that out, but I don't know that for sure. Generally, harvesting practices are not carried out in wilderness areas. And I would say that if there's an obligation to one of the forestry companies, then that's a commitment that we would have to be compelled to fulfill, but we would look for a volume from another source.
The honourable member for Kings West on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this NDP government seemed to make changes to legislation and regulations as they see fit to suit their business deals. Their deal with Northern Pulp last year has put them in a predicament. They need to supply that company with fibre. My question to the minister, why are you putting the environment and ecosystem at risk, allowing for Chignecto to be logged, even as a fully protected wilderness area?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, there is a process, and I want the member to be aware that if it becomes a protected area, then it would be my expectation that those harvesting practices would cease, but we would still have an obligation to fulfill that volume from some other piece of ground. But the presently, the Crown land that's in question there is an agreement with a company. If there is an agreement with the company, because I'm not entirely sure there is, but it's one that you know, if you make an agreement, you stand by it, and if something changes in that, then we won't see that they suffer from a commitment that we made.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just before I begin, I would like to say that I appreciate the previous member's interest in Cumberland South, where the Signecto Game Sanctuary resides. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Premier. Oh, I don't think so. On Argyle Street, there sits a huge, ugly hole in the heart of this city's downtown. This location is where the new convention centre is supposed to go. Just as the jails in Cumberland County and Antigonish County were economic drivers for those regions, so too is the convention centre an economic driver for this city and our province. Right. Mr. Speaker, my question for the Premier: will the Premier show some leadership on this project and convene a meeting of the relevant stakeholders to sort out the mess his government is making of this important project?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, you know, we didn't do what the former government did. What we did do was do a proper analysis of the project. Mr. Speaker, we ensured that what ultimately will happen with this site and our involvement in it will mean that the taxpayers of Nova Scotia will get the best possible deal as a result of the work that will be done, whether it's the number of jobs created or the economic spin-offs. We have set out that in detail for the municipality, and we're now waiting to hear from them on whether or not they intend to partner in this project. We obviously agree that it's important to the province. It's an important opportunity for us. But, Mr. Speaker, we also have a responsibility to the taxpayers of Nova Scotia. I know that's something that the former government didn't worry about, but we do.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, at the rate this government is going, we'll be waiting 100 years for a decision on this important project. Because the government has shown no leadership. In fact, it has waffled continuously and has shown little respect for its funding partners, including Halifax Regional Municipal Council. In fact, the government sent its transportation deputy to council carrying a poison pill letter, one that was known to be unacceptable to the council, in order to stall the project. And I have that letter, and I will table it for the House at this time. Mr. Speaker, my question through you to the Premier: will you please take the lead on this file, work constructively with HRM and the other funding partners to conclude an agreement that is fair to taxpayers and will allow this important project to proceed?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the letter sets out very clearly the position of the province. We think it's a perfectly reasonable one. We think it's one that if the municipality looks at in any kind of detail, does their own financial analysis, that they will be able to endorse. And we're hopeful that will be the case, Mr. Speaker. Our interest, of course, is to protect the taxpayers of Nova Scotia. That's what we're going to do. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, that this is a great opportunity for the municipality. There are hundreds of millions of tax dollars that they will get as a result of the building of this project. It is one that will be an important economic driver for the city and the province for many years to come. We've done our due diligence on it. It's now up to the municipality.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, with that answer, I know that the taxpayers of Nova Scotia will be just as comforted as the retailers in Cumberland County are by this government's tax policies.
Shame on them.
Mr. Speaker, a recent study by Gardner Pinfold showed that over the first 10 years of operation, a new convention centre would host 6,800 events, to have 2.2 million visitors to this city, and inject $750 million into the local economy, and I will table that report for the House. Mr. Speaker, my question for the Premier: will he stand up for economic development in our city? Will he unequivocally state his support for this project by committing today that he will have an arrangement approved by January 14th that is acceptable to Nova Scotia taxpayers and will allow the project to proceed?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, last June, the days of writing blank checks were over. Mr. Speaker, they were over. And we have done a proper analysis.
Order. Order. Order, please. Order. The Honourable Premier has the floor.
We did an appropriate announcement, a proper analysis of the project. We set forward the conditions on which we were prepared to support the project. We forwarded to the municipality. We think they are perfectly reasonable. We think there's a good reason to believe that the municipality, when they do their own financial analysis, that they will understand that. We hope that the project will move forward, Mr. Speaker, and we think this will have great benefit for the province and for the city.
The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, recently the provincial government announced targets for all departments to look at reducing their spending. Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations was asked to look at reducing their spending by 10%. With these new government directives, Mr. Speaker, I find it difficult to understand why Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations has called a tender on November 3rd for office space in the town of Digby in order to relocate the Weymouth Registry Land Registration Office. So my first question, Mr. Speaker, through you to the Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations, can the Minister explain to the many people of Clare and the surrounding communities of Weymouth why is your department determined to move the registry office in Weymouth to the town of Digby?
The Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As part of our making sure that we can live within our fiscal means, we're looking at consolidating services, and so therefore we're looking at bringing all of the areas that from the surrounding into the Digby area. There is a tender out, and that will be examined in due time. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Clare on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, currently the registry office is located in Weymouth, which is located in the middle of the county. I'm told the majority of the people using these services are from the Weymouth and Clare area. For some people living in the communities located at the far end of Clare, such as Springdale, Lake Dowsett, Beaver River, Woodvale, Hectanuga, Mayflower, these residents have to travel a good 45 minutes to an hour to get to the registry office in Weymouth now, Mr. Speaker. By moving the office to Digby, the Minister will be imposing an additional 30 minutes to their travel in order to get to the town of Digby, in order to get the new registry, office. So my second question, Speaker, through you to the Minister, is why is the Minister forcing these residents to drive an hour and a half in order to access the services provided by your department?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much for the question. One of the things that we're looking at is to make sure that we centralize our services and meet the needs of Nova Scotians. We are also in the process of making sure that we can have our services online so people can do that. They also provide services by mail. We are looking at a tender because we're also looking at the safety of the people that work within our facilities. There are issues in that area that we need to look at to make sure that our employees are safe. So there is a tender out, and we'll be exploring that tender when that comes due. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Clare on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the current registry office in Weymouth was opened in 1998 by her department. The current facility is very suitable. It is more than adequate, and there will be no cost saving to the department. Mr. Speaker, there's been a registry in Weymouth since 1785. Now, Mr. Speaker, the minister is looking at closing the office in Weymouth after 225 years. So my final question to the minister, will you put a stop to your department's plan to close the registry office in Weymouth until you get a chance to hear from the public in Digby County?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What I will promise to do right now is to make sure that we make appropriate decisions within our fiscal reality. We are going to make sure that we do provide good services for people in Nova Scotia. We'll be looking at the best possible place to make sure that our services are centralized and the people in Nova Scotia get the appropriate services. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Premier. Two of the requirements of leadership, Mr. Speaker, are decisiveness and the willingness to articulate a clear plan. Yet what we have seen from this government is indecisiveness and unwillingness to say where the government stands with respect to future regulation of the forest industry in Nova Scotia. On the one hand, we have a minister saying, as he did on August 9th, that he has no intention of making decisions that would undermine the basis of forest industry jobs. On the other hand, we have two conflicting reports of the government's expert panel, which, if adopted, would have a dramatic effect on the industry for decades. My question to the Premier, when are the people who derive their livelihood from the forest industry going to see real leadership from this government that they are so desperately seeking? When will they have the answers they need to know?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've actually had the opportunity to engage with many of the companies and stakeholder groups that were involved in the consultation to hear from them about the forest policy, about the questions associated with forestry in the province, and we made sure that we have been careful to go through and to try and help build consensus around these issues. We're continuing that work, Mr. Speaker, and we think the process has been a good one. As the member would know, there are a variety of opinions with respect to this policy, so we are taking the time to make sure that we get it right.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There appears to be many opinions on this policy within the government itself. So my question through you to the Premier is this. Will the Premier please explain to this House how the woodlot owners of this province are supposed to plan for their future and the future of this industry when the government cannot even provide them with a simple answer like what a clear cut is?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's not true. I believe the Minister responsible for natural resources actually set out a very clear definition of what a clear cut is, Mr. Speaker. But the question of clear cuts in the province will be dealt with by the Natural Resources Strategy.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party in your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My final question. This government needs to learn that there is a cost to doing nothing and allowing uncertainty to prevail in an important industry. So my question to the Premier, will he now end the uncertainty and get on with the job of providing the answers that woodlot owners need?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess this is a good opportunity to congratulate the Minister responsible for natural resources for the work that he's done on this file. He has invested an extraordinary amount of time and energy and effort in meeting with people from one end of the province with respect to this policy, Mr. Speaker. Being careful to understand the nuances of the effects on small woodlot owners, on large commercial harvesters, Mr. Speaker. We want to make sure that we have a policy that preserves this important natural resource, but also preserves the jobs that are associated with it, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to the Premier. I'm going to go to the Minister of Natural Resources, where I will get an answer. I will get an answer. Mr. Speaker, last week the Minister of Natural Resources spoke at the rally to save our forests outside the legislature. The minister gave assurances that regulations and policy around clear cutting would become by the end of the week. Now, that was last week. My question to the Minister of Natural Resources: when will we see your government's regulations on the future of our forests?
The order, please. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for his question. I made a commitment on policy direction, not on regulation. Regulations, I would expect, would probably take at least till the spring to have those written.
The honourable member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, whole tree harvesting is one of the most devastating forestry practices in existence. In these instances, the trees are hauled out in full to the roadside, landing where they are delimbed and chipped for processing. My question to the minister: will a ban on whole tree harvesting be part of these regulations?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I guess the member opposite will have to be like the rest of Nova Scotians, and when I make that statement, he'll know the same as everybody else.
The honourable member for Kings West on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as Nova Scotians know and as the NDP government know, it's been a real embarrassment to give the green light to allow Wagner Forestry Management to whole tree harvest on a quarter of the parcel at Applehead, Cumberland County. It appears, Mr. Speaker, that whole tree harvesting has already begun in this area. 2,100 acres of this newly protected area will be flattened under our non-existent harvesting regulations. Minister, you have the ability to shut down this operation tomorrow. My question to the minister: why did you permit Wagner Forest Management to whole tree harvest before you introduced the new regulations on forestry in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We don't have the new regulations because the strategy isn't quite complete. Under the previous administration, the timelines were set. We're hoping to hit them, and that's by the end of this year that we'll have our strategy fully outlined. That will give an indication of what the regulations will be. So until then, we have to let industry work with the regulations that government has before them, and we do have harvesting regulations. The member and one of his colleagues has also indicated that I can tell Wagner Forestry to stop. We didn't give them the green light. They had the green light. They already owned the property. So they can harvest 500 acres as part of an agreement to purchase, Mr. Speaker, something they could have done whether they sold it to us or sold it to somebody else.
The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we all have heard through the news and, of course, in this legislature the last couple of days about the flooding that's happening in my constituency, in the constituency of Yarmouth, I believe also in Shelburne. The things that are going on, Mr. Speaker, we know that there's been tremendous flooding and some subsiding, actually, last few hours in communities like Quinnan. But we do have some concern about the communities that are in Tuscot and those areas as the water continues to flow down the Tuscot system. So my question to the minister responsible for EMO, just wondering if there's a bit of an update for us about the situation in my neck of the woods.
The honourable minister responsible for Emergency Management Organization.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. We are undergoing one of a storm system that no one would have ever anticipated that Nova Scotia was going to receive so much rain so very quickly. I don't have an update, but I do want to say that Nova Scotia Power is in the vicinity of concern that the member brings up. A week ago, they were anticipating that there was going to be weather, and they did the best they could likelihood to lower levels in the dam. As you know, we're at maximum capacity in that area. I've been keeping in communication with the honourable member on that. Since I've been in the House, I haven't had an update, but as soon as I hear anything, I will be making sure that that is goes out in an advisory, and I also will advise the member opposite personally. Thank you.
The honourable member for Argyle on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I thank the minister for her commitment on this one. I thank her for her input on this one over the last number of days. We are coming to a bit of a crossroads, I believe, in the flooding, where the lower part of the system is now experiencing what we're hearing at 28 feet or 29 feet above flood process. So, Mr. Speaker, that there's a lot of systems there, a lot of dams and those kinds of systems that are in there that are, of course, a huge concern to us. Mr. Speaker, over the next number of days, once we do get past this one, there will be the issue of compensation maybe for the people of our area. So I'm just hoping that there's going to be support for them in the near future, whether it be things with DFAA and those kinds of things. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The time for oral question period has expired. And before we go to the PC Opposition Day, I just want to briefly bring to the attention of the House that it's come to my attention that a portion of the petition tabled earlier today by the member for Inverness is a printout of an internet petition and does not contain real signatures, so that portion of the petition is out of order. Once again, I remind all members that electronic petitions are out of order and are not to be tabled. I'll now recognize the PC Opposition House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And can you call Resolution 1925?
Resolution 1925. The honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to stand today to speak to resolution, the operative clause being, therefore be it resolved, all members of the House of Assembly urge this NDP government to do the right thing, preserve an important Cape Breton institution, and act quickly to save Holy Angels School. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that it was very evident here today that this is an issue that is of interest to everyone in this House. It is something that is of great interest to the people in Cape Breton, and it's of particular interest and with a great deal of passion that the students who are currently enrolled at Holy Angels School have a feeling about this. They came here, they believed that they would be heard. They came here because they believe that something is wrong with the process, something is wrong with the decision, and they thought, Mr. Speaker, they thought that by coming here to Province House to share those concerns and to watch the proceedings in the House, to get a chance to let people know how passionate they were and how proud they were. And, Mr. Speaker, I have to tell you, they've got home with heavy hearts. And the reason they've gone home with heavy hearts is because they did not get an ear from the minister. Yes, they got some time with the minister. And the minister's own words were that it was an excellent meeting. Well, Mr. Speaker, I had a chance to talk to some of those people who were in the meeting with the minister. I believe that the Minister of Education is a kind, caring, and compassionate person. I've told her that, and I will tell her that again, and I will say that publicly. And I believe that what's happening within the NDP caucus and cabinet is tearing her apart, because it is not the kind, caring, compassionate action that we would expect from her. So I do have sympathy for the minister, but I also want to express my thoughts about the process. We had students here, we welcomed them, they were standing out in the rain. There were a number of the MLAs who went out to see those students, and as an educator, I was happy to be one of those. I joined the member from Cape Breton South, the member from Cape Breton North, the member from Cape Breton West, the member from Victoria the Lakes, and we listened and we talked to those students. I know the member from Glace Bay spoke to them, and I believe some other MLAs may have as well. What they wanted was to have someone in a position that they respect, and that is our position as MLAs, to listen to them and to act on their behalf and to promote their cause. So they came, they were enthusiastic, they left, but let me tell you, we have not heard the last of from those students. They have resolved, and they have said in their own words, this is the first page. There are many more to come. And I think that should reinforce in the minds of all of us here and in those who are making the decisions here, i.e. the government, that this is an issue that should not be taken lightly. I have to tell you that, in my opinion, the decision was made in December of 2009 or perhaps earlier. It was in December of 2009 that I wrote to the minister to let her know that this was a concern. And I thank the minister for her response. But in that response, she was already talking about options that did not include buying the school, allowing it to continue in the building that it is currently in. So back from 2009, someone in the cabinet or in the government had made a decision. So why play the charade? Why do we continue to lead these students on and let them believe that there are options when the only option they want is one that has been dismissed? I asked a question in the House. I asked it of the minister, and it was very clear in her response that buying that building is not an option. And I will, if I could, Mr. Speaker, share with you some of the response that the minister gave, and I will table it for those people who wish. When asked about the future of Holy Angel School, and remember, we're talking about a decision that's perhaps already been made, but nobody wants to say it. Quote, it is important to separate out where the school functions from the future of the school. Another quote from the minister, the department committed to working with the board to look at what options were. Well, there was only one option, Mr. Speaker. Another comment from the minister when she responded, and I quote, we will work closely with the board to develop those options. These students don't want options, they want one option, and it's clear what that option is. Another comment, another quote from the minister, the preferred option of buying the school was not feasible. How much clearer do we need to get? That is a no. That means no, we will not buy it. We went on, and the minister said, and I quote, we just couldn't afford that option. This was as a result of some meetings where department staff went down and met with the school board in July. So in December, they were talking about options that didn't include buying. In July, they tell the school board committee that they can't afford it, that purchasing is not an option. Yet we continue to talk to these students and to the school community about trying to do what's right for the students at Holy Angels. And in my opinion, that is misleading. Another quote from the minister when she responded, and I quote, there's lots of excess space in that board. Another quote, we will work to see if there's room in another school. Well, let me tell you, the students can read between the lines, and they are beginning to believe that the decision was made, and yet they are being led along a path that they do not like. To add, I guess, insult to injury, we had a press release that came out today. And that press release is entitled, "Committed to Keeping Holy Angels School Open." Well, we can play with words here, Mr. Speaker, but you know and I know and everyone in Cape Breton who has read this knows that keeping Holy Angels School open does not mean keeping the building that the Holy Angel School is now in open. And this press release can be seen as a fairly feeble attempt to quiet the students who are coming here today and to make them feel that, yes, the government was going to keep Holy Angel School open. They know the difference. They know that the decision to keep Holy Angel School open has already been made. There were tears in the eyes of those students when they were here in the gallery today. And the tears were because they believed that somebody here would listen. They were excited when they came and they were chanting outside, and they were heard by those of us who went out to listen. They were excited when they got into this building. For many of them, they'd never been here before. They recognize that this is a place where decisions are made. They were excited about the opportunity to have a representative group meet with the minister. And they were severely disappointed when the minister told them it was not her responsibility. Sure, they talked about the testimonies, they talked about the quality programming that's there, but when they asked the minister what she was going to do, they were told it was not her responsibility. Well, Mr. Speaker, you know, and I know, and anybody who knows how school boards work in this province, is that the funding for the school boards does come from the Department of Education. It is taxpayers' dollars that go to the school boards to help them operate their schools. This is a school that's been subsidized by the sisters, and those students are out there saying, we've been subsidized. Now we want the board, through the funding that they get from the Department of Education, to pick up the slack, to put the money into the school, and to keep it open. And one of the concerns that has been raised, and I consider it to be a red herring, as many other people do, is to talk about a $10 million renovation project. Well, again, anyone who knows how school boards operate and where they get their funding and how they get renovations to their schools in their board is pretty clear. The board puts in a request to have renovations done when it's deemed that the building needs repairs. And there are many schools that are put on that list, and there are many renovations projects, Mr. Speaker, that are phased in. And the people in Cape Breton and the girls in Cape Breton know. Look at Riverview and Cox Heath. Look at Sydney Academy. These are schools that have required millions of dollars of work. But the board recognized that, the department responded to that, and those buildings are being renovated through the course of 3, 4, 5 phases. So my comment here today is this: let's cut the charade. The Premier said today that they would not buy it. Let's cut the charade and let's be honest with these students and tell them that there's no intent by this government to buy that building and to allow them to stay where they are. They'll be wharfed off into a wing at Breton Education Centre with a sign that says Holy Angels.
10 seconds.
That's no maintaining the institution. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to stand today and talk a little bit about the Holy Angels situation. As many of us know, we were joined today by some representative students and parents from Holy Angels community. And I took the opportunity to meet with a group of about a dozen or so, plus a few parents, for approximately an hour this afternoon. And it was interesting because they certainly were very passionate about their educational experience at Holy Angels and talked a lot about their, their personal experience. But then we broadened the discussion out to talk about various options and the roles of some of the major players in this situation. The school board, the department, the government, the community. And I was very pleased when they left that one or two of the adults said thank you, that they were leaving with some hope because they understood that if people work together in a very practical, respectful, common sense approach, that there may be solutions to keeping Holy Angels open. And that was the message they were looking for. They wanted to see some hope. They wanted to have a better understanding of how the various groups related, what their roles and responsibilities were. And it was an excellent hour, and I thank them for their very thoughtful questions, their very respectful attitude. And I'm looking forward to more of that when I visit Holy Angels on Friday. And also in the afternoon, I'm planning to have a good discussion around the options and encourage the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board to ensure that they look into absolutely every single option and choice available to them to keep that school open. The government and the Department of Education and myself as minister, we join the supporters and advocates of the Holy Angels educational experience, because we understand that they not only have a rich legacy of 125 years, but they are providing a very modern, extraordinary educational experience for not only the student population that's there now, but also into the future. And I was very impressed by the young women that spoke to me this afternoon, in that they were just as concerned about the younger women in the community having the same opportunity as they did to attend the school as they were about being able to finish their own high school years in that building. So there is no question that it's a wonderful school. The government recognizes that. The Department of Education recognizes that. I'd just like to share a little bit about the process that happened. When the department was notified by the school board last, I'm thinking November, December, that the Congregation of the Sisters of Notre Dame wanted to sell the complex, we were just as sort of horrified as the school board, because we realized the pressure that this was going to put on everyone. And we were concerned about looking at the options available. Senior staff from the department met with senior staff and the board chair and the vice chair on several occasions. We also, both here and in Halifax, senior staff met with representatives from the congregation to look at possible options such as extending the lease, perhaps increasing the payment of the lease in the short term, being able to stay there until a buyer was found. None of those options worked out. And it's very unfortunate, I would say, that in July, our staff went up and met with the board chair and other seniors officials to explain that, we had looked at our budget, because obviously their preferred option was to stay in the same location and have the province buy the school. We explained to them in July that this was not possible with the strains and stresses on the Department of Education budget. But we committed and have since that date been trying to work with the board to identify some practical, doable options that would secure the legacy and provide a very good experience for those young women, preferably in that building. And that's why today in the press release, we talked a little bit about, thinking outside the box. It's my understanding that it's the whole complex on that block that the congregation wished to sell. And there's certainly a lot more space and buildings there than the school. So, you know, possibly the community might come together and look at a broader vision for that area of Sydney. It may be that a number of programs and services and community groups and agencies might be able to operate from that complex. So it would be interesting to see if something sort of visionary and forward-thinking like that would be considered by the board, the community, and the municipality. It's important that we don't just look at things in the traditional way that we've looked at them. I think one of the challenges of governing at any level of government these days is to make sure that we're delivering programs and services that are of value and priority to citizens in a way that is cost efficient and provides, perhaps even improves the quality of that service and programming. And I think we have an excellent opportunity here to support the school board in investigating some innovative, unusual, non-traditional approaches to this particular challenge. The only condition that the province has been forced to put on this is that we have to be able to live within our means. It's important to Nova Scotians that we stay consistent in our message, and it's living within our means. I've had the opportunity to meet over the past year with graduates from Holy Angels, and they too, like the current students, have been extremely proud of their attendance at that school. They have talked a lot about how important and almost transformational that experience was to attend an all-girls school. And we certainly, recognize that in that community and for that board, having an all-girls school is a priority, and we will work to support the board as they try to protect that initiative, and that it represents the values of that community. I just wanted to also mention that early February, I believe it was, I had the opportunity to visit Holy Angels, and it was unfortunate that we had a bit of a weather disturbance that day, and the roads were icy, so the school was canceled. But I had the opportunity to meet with the principal and staff, a couple of the sisters from the congregation, the chair of the school advisory committee, and some other representatives. Certainly the board chair and the superintendent and others were there as well. And so we spent some time talking about the value of Holy Angels. I had a chance to tour the school, and it'll be particularly exciting for me to go back this Friday when hopefully the students will be in school and have a chance to see the school spirit and the sense of togetherness that is obviously a very important part of their experience. There are options, Mr. Speaker, and when I meet with the board Friday afternoon, I'm going to insist that they present those options to me both then and into the future, that they research them, that we understand the implications of each of them, and that we look at any barriers or challenges they may have with moving forward on any of them, because the Department of Education does not make those decisions. Nearly $1 billion of taxpayers' money goes to support public education in this province, and it's distributed to the 8 school boards, 1 provincial, the Francophone, and 7 regional boards on a formula basis. There is some dedicated funds, but a lot of it is in a single envelope, which boards use to allocate among staff, facilities, and programming. And that way, the regional boards have the opportunity to reflect the interests, the priorities, the values of their community in a way that also includes the mandatory public school program that is necessary under legislation to provide. And so that's why we see differences, regional differences, because communities often have different priorities, and the boards, which are an elected level of government, are in a position to reflect those unique priorities and needs within their region. And that's why it would be very inappropriate for a provincial government to step in and dictate how the school board chooses to use its financial and human resources. But we will work with them, Mr. Speaker, in order to identify the options that are possible for them to protect Holy Angels. We're committed to doing that. We've been doing it for the past year. The board fully understands, and we will ensure that they put those options on the table. That they work with interested groups and within the community to make those decisions, because they need to understand where the support is coming from, who's willing to do what, and they need to look at unique and, as I said, innovative ways of reaching a compromise, a solution that will meet everybody's needs in this particular situation. And I'm confident that that level of government will take up this responsibility and this challenge in a very professional way, because it's all about the students. I know there's suggestions that there's undercurrents and other agendas going on here, but I think that we are all committed to serving the best needs of the students across this province, and I will be taking that message to both Holy Angels, the community and supporters, and to the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board when I go to Sydney on Friday. The government and the Department of Education are committed to ensuring that those options are in place and that a very careful, well-considered approach is taken to reaching these decisions. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure that the people of Sydney and area that have children going to Holy Angels, or those who have graduated from Holy Angels, would be very happy to see the minister this weekend or this Friday, whenever she's coming, and I'm sure she'll get the kind of reputation or kind of reception that will dictate what's been said in this House today, I guess, and will be an appropriate reception. I want to thank my colleagues in the Progressive Conservative Party from Cape Breton who have joined in this debate and to assist me in trying to convince the government that the school in question, which is in my riding of Cape Breton South, remains there and remains an active educational institution. The honourable members from Cape Breton West and Cape Breton Victoria, the Lakes, and also Cape Breton North, as well as the critic for the education for the Progressive Conservative Party, the member for Colchester North. I want to thank them, and I also want to thank my colleague in the legislature from Glace Bay, Jeff McClellan, newly elected member, who also signed the petition today, the petition that I was proud to present in the House today. And Mr. Speaker, that petition had 7,500 names, 7,500 names who don't agree with you, Madam Minister. And as we were speaking today, there were more petitions coming in, which will be probably presented tomorrow and over the next few days. Mr. Speaker, the Sisters of the Congregation of Notre Dame have started a proud legacy at Holy Angels since 1885. And for a number of those years, those sisters taught at Holy Angels, taught young women with very little in reward except the satisfaction that they were putting a good educational product in their building in the north end of Sydney. And it's unfortunate that the minister keeps talking, Mr. Speaker, about options. The Premier, let's say for the record what the Premier said today. For the record, the Premier said his government will not be buying Holy Angels. So all the spin in the world that the minister's putting on is nothing more than that, just political spin. She's been scripted very well, Mr. Speaker, to keep saying that she's going to meet and discuss options. Well, the only option that I know that the students want there, and the people, the 7,500 who signed the petition, is to remain in the present building at Holy Angels. And the Premier has cut that idea adrift today by saying his government's not going to purchase a school. But yet again, the minister comes out today with another press release, another spin from the spin doctors over at the Department of Education. And it's the second paragraph when it states the purchase of consider all options, including helping to coordinate. So they're going to get in now, if I get this right, they're going to go and coordinate the efforts by a community organization or moving the school and students to another location. That's in her press release, Mr. Speaker, today. When she meets with the board on Friday, she's going to say that you have the option. Go out and get a community group. One of the clubs that operate in the Sydney area, you know, like I said earlier in question period, maybe the Lions Club might want to buy it and run the education system for Holy Angels, or the KOC, or the YMCA, or whomever. But, you know, when she says community groups, in other words, they're going to wash their hands of the educational system at Holy Angels in that present building, but they're allowing somebody else to buy it and run it. In the year 2010, the education system in Nova Scotia has regressed so much that we're now going to turn over the operation of an all-girls school to a community group. Come on, Madam Minister. I'm surprised you even let that go out today. You know, whoever conned you into letting that go out today should be ashamed of themselves in the Department of Education. $750,000, or as I said in question period the other day, or less, with a sharp negotiator. I might be able to get it for a little less. I can only assume that the government has already made up its mind that Holy Angels is going to cease to exist on that site and cease to exist as an all-girls school, because those excellent students that have attended Holy Angels and are attending at Holy Angels do not want to be assimilated in another school. They've had a precious thing. They've had an educational icon there for years, and they do not want to be dumped in another school, such as the rumor that's running around the school in the Deputy Premier's riding, called Breton Education Centre, which is suffering from lack of enrollment, and it poses a serious problem for the board in the future. Well, the answer to that problem, Mr. Speaker, is not to cause another problem by taking Holy Angels out of the system and putting those students out there. They're not going to stand for that, nor should they have to even consider that. The renovations has been mentioned, Mr. Speaker, and I agree that school is going to have to be renovated. So was Sydney Academy, and it was done by the previous government. So was Riverview High School. So was Badek. So are some junior highs. No matter, while we're talking junior highs, and the minister talks about money, I believe there's a new junior high going in the Premier's riding at a cost of $8 or $9 million. That's the word that I hear, but if that's not true, the minister can correct me, but I understand there's a new school going out there. However, the money is going to be found for that, I guess. But anyway, the minister is blaming the board, I think, by saying that it's the board's responsibility and trying to put the onus on the board to accept the heat that's going to come from the constituency people who are concerned about this, from all constituencies, Cape Breton West, Cape Breton Centre, Cape Breton Nova, Cape Breton North, and the others constituents, Cape Breton Nova, as I said, Glace Bay. All of those constituencies have young women attending Holy Angels. And all of them have a great deal of pride in their school. They have a great deal of pride in the fact that they're going to an all-girls school, and they act accordingly. The minister met with the students today and congratulated them for coming up here today. They shouldn't have had to come up here today in a bus, but they did. A bus they had to raise the money to come up here with. A bus that they had to go out and get the money. Some of the parents put their own money into this bus coming up here today. School board knew they were coming here. The minister agreed to meet with them, and I thank the minister for that. But what she said to them is, we're going to discuss options on Friday. Well, again, Mr. Speaker, I tell you that one of the options, And I'm speaking now to the people back home. Don't be fooled by that, because the Premier said in this House today that the government is not purchasing Holy Angels and continuing to operate it as a school. Even though, Mr. Speaker, for many, many years, the governments of the day, be it this government or the previous government or the one before that, got off pretty easy in the costs of Holy Angels over the year, because the Sisters of the Congregation of Notre Dame subsidized that school for years. And now they wanted to pass along, and they did pass along their legacy to the present-day administration at Holy Angels, who have carried on the excellent reputation of Holy Angels, carried it on to the point where it's received national attention on its academic excellence, which it always receives great grades when it comes to providing of education in this all-girls setting. For years, Mr. Speaker, we have heard and the cry about not enough money in education and all of the things that go along with that, like having to cut back here, cut back there. And you know what? In some cases, I think it's a matter of choices. And here the government has a choice to keep a unique all-girls school, the only one in the public system east of Montreal, to keep it open in that setting in historic North End, Sydney, where it's been for years, next to the Holy Angels Convent, where the sisters actually live. And it's been there for many, many years and has contributed greatly to the economic well-being of downtown Sydney, where 300 girls are coming in and out of that school every day, and it's close to the main downtown area of Sydney. But the Premier has said, now, but you know what? I think there's hope when the Premier says something, because he has a habit of changing his mind when the heat is on. So maybe if there's enough heat on in this way, that he'll be bound to it. But I suggest that the Premier come to Sydney and tell the people of that area, tell the people of your constituency, Mr. Deputy Speaker, or the constituency of Cape Breton Centre, or the other constituencies that are not government constituencies down there, why he's refusing to spend $750,000 to keep an icon going in the centre of Sydney, to keep a school going that has an excellent reputation over the years of providing quality education, Mr. Speaker, and also to keep a school there that will keep the tradition alive that was started by the Congregation of Notre Dame. And I mentioned the other day that people like Senator Peggy Butts, who was a pioneer in fighting for women's issues and fighting for the Holy Angels School itself, and people like Sister Agnes Cordeaux, you know, and all her sisters. Agnes Cordeaux, of course, was a principal there, and all the other sisters who were there, Sister McGinnis, and I could go on, but I don't want to do that because I'm going to miss some names. But I can tell you that those sisters in that congregation were dedicated to keeping a quality education for girls at the high school level in Sydney. Now, for the minister to discuss options and say that she's going to discuss options with the board, but on the one hand, she says the board is responsible for delivering the program. On the other hand, she's going to discuss options. So I don't know which it is, but I do know one thing, that the government, your ministry, the Minister of Education's ministry and the Finance Minister have the hands on the purse string. The school board doesn't. And you know what? The school board might feel a bit intimidated by this exercise that's going on, because what's happening with the school board, they're torn. They're torn by trying to protect Holy Angels and agree that we should take over that particular building because they might incur the wrath of the Provincial Department of Education in other ways. And they're struggling to keep the education system going in our riding. And it wouldn't be the first time that has happened. But, you know, it's all about choices, Mr. Speaker, and, you know, the Minister of Finance and other people in the government have made choices. They chose to pay a civil servant $340,000 to get rid of him. There was no problem doing that. I didn't hear anybody stand up and say we didn't have the money to do that. He just disagreed with government policy. So he was gone, $340,000 out the window. But to keep a school open that teaches excellence for young ladies in our community down in Cape Breton, to keep that open is a problem. You know, $50 million in Pictou County for a foreign company that may or may not prove to be a good investment is not a problem. But $750,000 to keep a school open, an all-girls school that's the only one east of Montreal, suddenly is a problem. I think, Mr. Speaker, that the reason it's a problem, I think that the fix is in here. I think what they want to do is close Holy Angels and move those students into another school, possibly Breton Education Center. So I'll be watching that eventuality, Mr. Speaker, to see if that's going to happen. We must save Holy Angels, and we'll continue to work hard to do that until we reach our goal. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I will now recognize the honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can't say I'm pleased to rise today to speak to this resolution because I feel it's something we shouldn't even be discussing. But I first of all want to thank the students and the chaperones that were in the gallery this afternoon for showing their passion towards Holy Angels School. I know it's too bad that they had to leave to miss this debate, but I know they want to go to school tomorrow while they still have one. Mr. Speaker, it's been said many times in this House, Holy Angels is an institution for all of Nova Scotia to be proud of. I know we on this side of the House are proud of it, but it certainly appears those members on the opposite side aren't. Mr. Speaker, Holy Angels has been part of the community since 1885. 1885. Under the watchful eye of the Sisters of Notre Dame congregation. Now, in Holy Angels' time of need, the provincial government has turned its back on the school and the 299 young women who attend that school. Mr. Speaker, with this issue having been on the plate of the Minister for nearly a year, the students and staff alike have been left in limbo. There's been little or no effort on the part of this government and even fewer assurances. The only sure thing, as we heard from the Premier today, is that this government refuses to purchase Holy Angels High School. The $750,000 asking price for the facility is merely a fraction of the financial commitment the NDP government has made to a brand new facility in the Premier's hometown, which coincidentally would host the same number of students. What a coincidence. It's also minute in comparison to the recent land purchases made. It's not even in the ballpark. For this reason, the argument on fiscal constraint is no longer relevant. Mr. Speaker, what's becoming increasingly clear as this crisis unfolds is that there's a tremendous emotional attachment to this facility. Enrollment is increasing year after year. Its rankings are on the rise in the annual Ames report on schools. Our office has been flooded with letters and calls from concerned students, parents, and alumni. And just last week, 300 people jammed the gymnasium to show their support for Holy Angels School. And today, students and parents were here in this legislature to fight for their school. 7,500 signatures in that petition. Mr. Speaker, all relevant parties support this school's continued operation. From the opposition parties in this House to municipal council, and surprisingly, shouldn't be, to the school board. All trying to get this government to listen to the will of the people. Mr. Speaker, if I could, I would like to reference an email that our caucus office received just yesterday from a Holy Angels graduate who was also the daughter and granddaughter of Holy Angels graduates. And I'm just going to read a section of it, Mr. Speaker. I think the problem is that it's actually an invaluable institution. It's impossible to put a dollar value on the good Holy Angels represents. So those of us arguing for its continued existence are always at a disadvantage to those arguing for its closure or relocation on strictly financial grounds. Teachers' salaries, heat and lights, maintenance costs, and necessary renovations, however suspect, can be calculated and presented in dollar terms. The strength, independence, love of learning, and bonds of friendship that Holy Angels fosters in its students are not so easily quantified. But that makes them no less real. And Mr. Speaker, I will table that email. Mr. Speaker, just this morning, an incredibly confusing release came from the minister. Its title was, Minister of Education committed to keeping Holy Angel School open. It was misleading as it merely encouraged the school board to consider all options. This is not leadership, and it's not what the school community is looking for. Mr. Speaker, the decision on Holy Angels shows the lack of leadership this government has demonstrated since June of 2009. False promises, lack of ideas, and passing the buck. Already, Mr. Speaker, the board has basically been told that they have to find options for Holy Angels. The minister has referred numerous times in this House that the board look for room in existing facilities. Well, Mr. Speaker, let me through you say that that does not and will not work. Simply put, having Holy Angels be enveloped by another institution is totally unacceptable. It's the tradition of a standalone facility that makes it great. It can't be replicated by simply moving the students to another institution. The staff, students, everyone in that school, and the residents of Cape Breton stand united in their desire to see the proud school remain open. And anything but that would be utter failure on this government's part. Mr. Speaker, the minister said she spent about an hour speaking to the students. Well, we spoke to the students after their meeting, and they were told it's not the minister's responsibility. 56. Well, these bright young women don't buy that. The only cost to the board has been a $40,000 lease they paid to the sisters. The students who are here today call this a subsidy, and they reminded the minister of that. Now they're asking the province to do the right thing. The suggestion that was made by the minister to have someone else buy the building was stated again by the premier. Why are we trying to download the ownership of our schools to community groups? We have to question whether or not the decision is already made. We've asked the minister to convene an all-party meeting with the school board. That didn't happen. We've asked the minister to have her department negotiate with the Congregation of the Sisters of Notre Dame. Did that happen? Not that we're aware of. Another question that has to be asked: is the province waiting for someone else to buy the building so that they can continue to lease it from someone else? Mr. Speaker, if someone buys the building and it is a business, the lease is not going to be $40,000. The minister referred to it as an excellent meeting, that the group was leaving with some hope. Well, the ones that we spoke to say they didn't leave with any hope. I think, if anything, they left here more frustrated. They came here to get answers. The answers they got was the board we will meet with the board on Friday. Oh, and speaking of that, Mr. Speaker, I have to say I'm pleased that the minister is meeting with the board and staff of Holy Angels, and possibly, since we didn't get an all-party meeting, we would be willing to join her in that meeting if she so wishes. Yes, we would. Mr. Speaker, we asked the minister last week to table some of the options that were being discussed. There was never anything tabled, but today we heard that the students who were here were told about some options that could exist for Holy Angel School. So I guess I'm going to ask again, Mr. Speaker, that the minister please table the options that we requested last week that probably weren't there, but apparently are there this week. So if we could please have those tabled, it would be appreciated. The minister also has said a couple of times, reasonable people will make reasonable decisions. Remember the adage, build it and they'll come? Well, Madam Minister, move it and they won't. It almost seems, Mr. Speaker, that looking at other options will restrict and make more difficult the opportunity for students outside the Sydney area, where the bulk of the enrollment of Notre Dame comes from, the Holy Angels comes from. That's where they come from, outside areas. That will restrict that movement. If that school happens to be, as has been suggested, in Breton Education Centre, will the students from Georges River, will the students from the north side go to New Waterford? Will the students from Sydney leave and go to New Waterford? Nope. Those are questions that have to be asked, because you can take Holy Angels and make it a part of another school and have its own identity. But, Mr. Speaker, that identity is lost if you're sharing it with Breton Education Centre or you're sharing it with any other school in the board. Mr. Speaker, it's about leadership. And I think today, in a lot of the questions that we heard from our leader to the Premier, the questions were based on leadership. I think it's time, Mr. Speaker, that this Premier, this Minister, and this government show leadership, do the right thing, and keep Holy Angels High School where it is. Mr. Speaker, again, there's only one thing for certain. The Premier said during question period that the province is not buying the school.
It's pretty clear about that.
It seems that the agenda of this government, Mr. Speaker, is to divide and conquer. But, Mr. Speaker, it's going to be a rough road. The young ladies and parents that were in the gallery here today, and those attending Holy Angels High School, their parents and their grandparents, they're not going to be giving up, and no one on this side is going to be giving up either, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, do the right thing. That's all we ask. Do the right thing. Keep Holy Angels going as the existing facility that it is, and the benefits that will be derived from that will be tremendous. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I would like to thank all the honourable members for an excellent debate. And we have now, the time allotted for debate has expired, and I will now recognize the honourable House Leader for the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's taken a while to get used to all the titles. That concludes the business today for the Progressive Conservative Party. So I'll pass the baton back on to the Government House Leader.
Thank you. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The man has more titles than a Mexican fighter. And to which the leader of the third party knows much about boxing, I assure you, and he will depart much of that to us in the years to come. His knowledge of boxing is second to none, apparently, I've been told. Now with the business, Mr. Speaker. He's missing my best lines. Mr. Speaker, the hours for tomorrow will be noon to 4 p.m. And after following the daily routine, we'll be doing bills 83, 85, 87, and 88. I ask you to now rise to meet at the hours of noon tomorrow.
The motion for adjournment has been made. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. We will now sit tomorrow between the hours of 12 noon and 4 p.m. We have now reached the hour of interruption, and the debate has been chosen earlier on the submitted by the member from Kings North, and it states, therefore be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly take a moment to recognize the achievements and bravery of William Hall, VC, the first African-American, the first Nova Scotian, one of the first Canadians to receive the esteemed Victoria Cross. I will now recognize the honourable member for Kings North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a couple of days, in just 2 days, we'll observe Remembrance Day, and so it seems to me somehow fitting to recall one of our forebears who has contributed so much to Nova Scotia and to Canada. William Hall was born in about 1827. There are many things that we don't know for sure about this man, but he was born sometime around 1827 in Horton, Nova Scotia, to Jacob and Lucinda Hall, who were former American slaves, and probably, at least what history seems to be able to tell us, almost certainly refugees of the War of 1812. William was one of 7 children. We know he was the youngest of those children, and that, to my mind, suggests that he may have been more adventurous than people born at other spaces in his family. And certainly he acted on that. He attended school in Horton, probably, but we expect not for very long. And as a very young child, probably as a young adolescent, began working at the shipyards in Hantsport, which were quite prolific at that point. And he, sometime shortly thereafter, he set sail as a merchant marine. As a young man, he was working on trading vessels, and by the time he was 18 years old, he had probably visited most of the major ports in the world. Because of that travel, he spent 3 years in the American Navy, saw some service just after the Mexican War, and was discharged, and then in 1852 enlisted in the British Navy in Liverpool, England. And, you know, it's not so surprising, perhaps, that while William Hall was a man of color, man of African descent, he also was a man who was born into a time when the British government had created opportunities for people of African descent to serve in some of their institutions, and the military was one of those. So in 1852, he enlisted in the Royal Navy in Liverpool, England, and his first service was as an able seaman. He saw service on a number of ships and, in fact, saw considerable service in the Crimean War, where he won several medals for bravery and for the service that he spent there. In 1857, William Hall was serving in the Far East on the HMS ship, Her Majesty's ship Shannon, when at a time when the Indian regiments mutinied or became rebellious. And I think, you know, this William Hall became certainly both a